Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. TGIF. That's the first time I've said that in a long time on the channel. Get used to it. I'm going to start saying it a lot more in the future because I plan on regularly posting Friday videos that will include news items and a preview of the upcoming race weekend. This weekend, we'll be discussing Martinsville, and that means I'll have a breakdown of who has the best average starting and finishing position on the half-mile track, plus some other interesting nuggets of information about the track and drivers and the results there. This week, we're going to do a special feature on Chase Elliott because it was 10 years ago tomorrow that he made his Cup Series debut at the Paperclip. We're going to go through some of the highlights for the Hendrick Motorsports driver over the last decade, and I think there will be some things in there that you may not have known. And we're going to wrap up with a call for help. However, before we get to that, I want to go back to Wednesday and an interview I heard with Kyle Larson on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. The 2021 champion visited with veteran broadcaster Dave Moody. The pair talked about the 32-year-old driver's long weekend in Florida, where he won 2 of 3 races, including his Cup win, his win on Friday night in the Truck Series, and coming up just short in the Xfinity Series race after a dominating performance. After several minutes of conversation, the announcer shifted the discussion to the upcoming race in Martinsville. Take a listen.
Let's look ahead to Martinsville here. Hasn't been your best racetrack lately, at least by the numbers, by the finishing positions. How do we change all that this weekend?
I don't know what numbers you're looking at, but it's probably our best track.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean we've won, we've finished second multiple times. I think we finished third. We finished third there in the fall. Like it's surprisingly, it's probably statistically our best track. So, which it feels like my worst track. When I go there, I just feel lost. But we somehow finish really well there and score a lot of points. So, I mean, I don't have much confidence, I'll be honest, every time I go there because it is such a difficult track. But
right.
Hendrick Motorsports has a great package for it. One that I think, suits my style okay enough to finish well. So I get more excited to go there every time and hope we can have another good run.
The reason Larson fired back so quickly was Moody's comments about not being his best racetrack lately by the numbers and finishing positions couldn't have been further from the truth. In Larson's previous 5 races at Martinsville, the number 5 driver has recorded finishes of 2nd, 1st for his lone win in the spring of 2023, 6th, 2nd, and 3rd. I generally like listening to Dave's interviews because he does ask some really good questions, but he was totally ill-prepared on this one, and Larson justifiably called him out on it. Moving on to our next item, and surprise, surprise, it was something I heard yesterday on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. Larry McReynolds and Danielle Trotta had a theme yesterday on their show called Confident, Confused, and Concerned, where fans called in and discussed different drivers and signed one of the labels to them. Naturally, there's been concern with Ty Gibbs and his subpar performance this season. Well, as you might expect, America's crew chief had some thoughts on the subject.
When you're struggling, it's even more of a struggle if your teammates are struggling, because then you start questioning everything. You start questioning engine. You start questioning setup and chassis. You start questioning aero. But if you can look across the shop and you see someone like the 20 that's won 3 of our 6 races, you go, the good thing is we know it's obtainable. We know it's possible with what we have. But yeah, Tyler Allen is not trying to set up a race car for Christopher Bell. He's not trying to set a car up for Denny Hamlin or Chase Briscoe. He's trying to set up a car for Ty Gibbs. But here we go, the same old theme over and over and over. Not only does he have one finish inside the top 20, he has not led, I think I mentioned it, a single lap. He has not scored a single stage point. And Danielle, he only has 2 qualifying efforts better than 23rd. He qualified 13th at COTA and qualified 13th at Homestead last week. So the problem is when they unload the race car. It's not there on Saturday, and it's not there on Sunday right now.
While it's easy to pin the blame on the car lacking performance off the hauler and not getting the setup right, McReynolds didn't stop there. He also noted how Gibbs has struggled dating back to the final 5 races of 2024. I've also talked about it here on the channel, but the numbers don't lie. In that stretch of 5 races, Gibbs finished 35th at the Roval, 30th at Las Vegas, 36th at Homestead, 32nd at Martinsville, and 40th or dead last at Phoenix. Those final 5 races combined with the first half dozen races in 2025, and Gibbs has an average finishing position of 29.7. And another nugget that I mentioned in Monday's video, Gibbs tied J.J. Yaley last week at Homestead for the longest tenured driver at JGR without a win at 77 races. He'll officially take the lead this weekend at Martinsville if he doesn't win. And based on the numbers, there's not a chance of that happening. Speaking of crew chief driver duos, another one came up on the show when a listener questioned the pairing of Elliott and Gustafson and Chase Elliott. Old Larry Mack had some thoughts.
We're getting a lot of tweets similar to Anthony's. TLS Bison tweets and says, Danielle, when you're talking Chase Elliott, crew chief, crew chief, crew chief, crew chief. No matter how many times.
I just think you're barking up the wrong tree.
No matter how many times Chase Elliott, preaches to Elliott Nation, don't put this on my guy. This is not Alan Gustafson's fault. I do wonder if ever Hendrick Motorsports is going to look at this. Chase Elliott is now in the midst of his 10th season with Alan Gustafson. Every single year he's been in Cup, Alan has been at the helm. That is the longest running active driver crew chief pairing in Cup. And it's bearing less and less fruit. You and I have always stood in the line, and I continue to stand in the line that this is not an Alan thing. Chase has said, this is a me thing. I have to figure out the feel of this race car. But if Chase Elliott fans, diehard fans, need someone to blame, they're not going to blame Chase. They're going to blame Alan. Right?
Oh, yeah.
That's the easiest place to shoulder their frustration.
That's all. It's the easiest position to change. It's the easiest spot to change.
You probably lived that with Dale Sr.
Exactly. And yeah, it's just the way things are structured. There may come a time when Rick says, you know what, let's just try something different. Let's try something different. But I just believe with all my heart, and I consider Alan a friend. Is he a really close friend? No. But I just don't see it with Alan Gustafson. I just don't.
I'm sure you Chase Elliott fans have some thoughts about it. Let me know about it in the comments section. And now it's time for our race preview of Martinsville, and I want to stick with the topic of Chase Elliott, since it was 10 years ago tomorrow that the Dawsonville, Georgia native made his Cup Series debut. In that first race, the 19-year-old Elliott worked with crew chief Kenny Francis and finished 38th. The pair worked together for the remaining 4 races, which saw Elliott earn a pair of 18th place results at Charlotte and Indianapolis, and his best finish, a 16th at Richmond. He concluded the season finishing 41st at Darlington. That next season, Alan Gustafson was brought on as the crew chief, and the two have worked together since for 323 races. They are currently the longest crew chief driver pairing in the NASCAR Cup Series garage. While number 9 fans might be frustrated with recent results, looking back on the last 9 years and 6 races together, and the duo has produced plenty of highlights. The first big one was his first career Cup win in 2018 at Watkins Glen in his 99th Cup Series race. 2 more wins followed that year at Dover and Kansas, but that first win at the road course served notice to the rest of Elliott's competitors. That's because over the next 4 years, Elliott was unquestionably the king of the road course, winning 7 races, including 4 in a row from 2019 to 2020. Number 9 fans remember that 2020 season well, which included at the time a career-best 5 wins for the season and ended with Elliott winning his first Cup Series championship at age 24, becoming the youngest champion since the modern era began in 1972. Interestingly, after HMS teammate Kyle Larson won the championship in 2021, which included 10 wins, Elliott returned back to the top as far as win totals in 2022, winning a series best 5 times. And remember, that was the first year of the next-gen car. In these last 10 seasons, Elliott has won a dozen poles and recorded 174 top 10s, 105 top 5s, and won 19 times. You can't say he's had a better track as far as wins are concerned, because he's gone to victory lane twice at Watkins Glen, the Roval, Dover, and Talladega. And we'll wrap up our 10 years of Chase Elliott's Cup career with this. I get that some Elliott fans are frustrated so far this season, But I'd also suggest that's not a matter of Chase being bad, but a matter of his HMS teammates being great. You look at the point standings currently, and it's Byron, Larson, and Bowman 1, 2, 3. Same is true in the average finishing positions with Bowman and Larson swapping positions. But in the points, Elliott is 6th, and in the AFP, he's 7th. So to suggest that Elliott isn't running well isn't true. In fact, here's a little fun fact. Elliott is the only driver in the Cup Series this season who doesn't have a finish of 20th or worse. Translation, he's consistent. He may not finish in the top 5 all the time, but he's not going to finish in the low 20s like his teammates and the rest of the field all have. I was at COTA, and he proved that after getting spun on the first lap and battling back and finishing 4th. All right, and now it's time to talk a little paperclip fun facts, and we'll start with this interesting tidbit. This weekend marks the 153rd running of a NASCAR Cup Series race at Martinsville Speedway, which is the only track that hosted a race every season from 1949 to 2025. Martinsville Speedway, at 152 NASCAR Cup Series point-paying races, has hosted the second most points-paying events all time, behind only Daytona International Speedway at 156. Want to know who will win on Sunday? It won't be someone who starts inside the top 10, according to recent numbers. The last 5 Martinsville races were won from starting positions outside the top 10, which is tied for the longest streak ever at the paperclip. You HMS fans remember last year's spring race because Hendrick Motorsports finished 1, 2, 3 for the first ever 1, 2, 3 finish by a team at the track. Here's an interesting streak that I think has a good chance of ending this weekend, and that's the last 7 races at Martinsville were won by drivers 30 years old or younger, the longest streak ever at the track. We talked a little earlier about Chase Elliott getting his first win in his 99th race. How about this stat at Martinsville? All but 3 of the last 76 races at Martinsville dating to 1987 were won by a driver with at least 100 career Cup Series starts. Sorry, Ty. We know one streak is guaranteed to end this weekend. Joey Logano's 11 straight top 10s at Martinsville is the longest active top 10 streak at Martinsville and his longest streak at any track. If Logano makes it 12, then he will break his streak to start the 2025 season where he hasn't earned a top 10, which, by the way, makes him the first defending champion without a top 10 finish in his first 6 races of the following season. Do you want pit stall 1? Not if you want to win. The last driver to win from pit stall 1 at Martinsville was Jimmy Johnson in April 2013. And we'll wrap up with this stat, and it takes us full circle to that first story on Kyle Larson. His average finishing position in the last 5 Martinsville races is 2.8, compared to 20.5 in the previous 15 races. And speaking of average finishes, here's a cool graphic from my buddy Joel Steuben that really breaks it down by each driver, including Larson, of how they have finished in the last 6 races or all the Gen 7 car races at the paperclip. Team Penske has been strong on the half-mile track, with both Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano holding down the top spots for average finishing positions at 3.5 and 5.2 respectively. And then 3 out of the next 4 drivers are from HMS, including Larson, William Byron, and Chase Elliott, who is tied with the other Chase, Briscoe, at 8.7. Elliott is followed by Denny Hamlin, Ross Chastain, Bubba Wallace, and Ryan Preece in his 4 starts. I didn't include SVG because he's only got the 1 start. Moving down to the bottom of drivers who have struggled at Martinsville in the Gen 7 car, and that includes Kyle Busch with an AFP of 21.3, Tyler Reddick at 23.7, Brad Keselowski at 23.8, and Justin Haley at 29.2. And that's a wrap of our first ever race preview of Martinsville. I hope you enjoyed it because we're going to do this every Friday going forward. And lastly, I have one order of business to tend to. I need your help. As you guys know, I write for Athlon Sports. I'm also the manager of the racing section. I'm looking for riders and not in NASCAR. I'm looking for experienced riders who have an interest in covering F1, IndyCar, and motocross. So if you think this is you, please send a resume to Kyle@beatingandbanging.com. That's Kyle@beatingandbanging.com. This is a great company and a great opportunity to cover motorsports and make some money. All right, guys, that's a wrap on today's episode. I want to hear what you thought about it, and let's start with the comments of Larry Mack, first on Ty Gibbs, and then on Chase Elliott. Do you think it's mainly a problem for the number 54 car coming off the hauler? And as for Elliott, do you think Alan Gustafson and Elliott's relationship is still working, or do you think there needs to be a change? Sticking with Elliott, I'm interested to hear what you thought of our feature on him and his 10 years in the NASCAR Cup Series. And finally, what did you think of my race preview of Martinsville? Any factoids in there that caught your attention? Thanks again for checking out the latest episode and supporting the channel. I really and truly appreciate it, and hope you have a great rest of your day.